Hey, welcome to the Alive and Well podcast, where my hope is that we create long-lasting transformation from the inside out as I connect with people who want the same for us. My guest today is Emilie Robinson, Doctorate of Physical Therapy. She specializes in lymphedema and oncology. She's also a certified Pilates instructor. She is passionate about holistic care and has even worked with patients in their end-of-life stages. She received an award called the Making a Difference Award through the Association of Women in Healthcare Incorporated.
I worked at Moffitt Cancer Center. I've worked in the acute care space and outpatient. So they would come to me just for physical therapy, but I found myself coordinating so many other facets of care for people that I felt like when I was in school and even when we got out of school, it was like nobody prepared you for like all the extra stuff that people were going to need. We learned about the ICF model, right? And it was like holistic, treat the patient holistically. But it was like, what does that really mean?
What does that mean?
Then,
yes.
Yeah. And then you get out there and you're like, oh, holy poop. Like there's so much more to this. And like, there are just the buck goes way beyond just coming in and, getting some physical therapy done. And
I hope you enjoy this talk with her. There's definitely a lot that we get into. Let's get started. I usually like to dive into people's past life before we get started into conversation. It just helps us understand who the person is, kind of gives us an idea of how they think today and what led them to specific careers and such like that. So tell us about young Emilie. What were you like and what was the family dynamics like growing up?
So young Emilie, I was very much I've been many things, right, over my life until now. And I'm not scared to say that I am 35 years old. So young Emilie was pretty shy when I was a kid. And then I really wanted to be friends with everybody and be liked by everybody. That has since kind of shaped how I've gone in different directions, maybe for the worse and for the better for some things. But I was really, really into dance and more arts, and I struggled in school when it came to grades and things like that. So I was really the C's get degrees student. And then when I was in high school, I distinctly remember everybody posting where they were going to go to college up on one of our class boards. Mm-hmm. And I had nowhere, and I was really unsure of what I was going to do. So then I decided, okay, community college it is. So I have lived in the Hillsborough County area of Florida, basically all of my life. So I found myself going to community college, really not sure, what I was going to do then. And then making it out, obviously, further down the line. But my family dynamics have always been really solid. I have an older sister. She's an attorney. My mom and dad are literally my biggest fans and the absolute light of my life. And, meeting my husband, having my daughter, she's 6 now. Those things I feel like without that good family dynamic would have been a lot different for me at this point.
Yeah, no, I love hearing that. When you were growing up, tell me about your relationship with your parents. Did they encourage you to be healthy, active? Was that kind of like the kind of talk around the house, or was that something you had to kind of develop on your own or get into?
Yeah. So I think, I'm a true millennial kid and my parents are boomers. And I was listening to this, I was at this amazing, when I was at the conference, that summit for the award, I was listening to there's so many similarities between boomers and millennials. And,
Really?
some of our differences, there really are. Yeah. We really have
what they say.
generational, I know, right? But they're like, my parents are like very much, I guess it sounds cliche to say like, they're not best friends, but they're even more than that. And my mom was always big on the home cooked meal, even when she was working, that we had something that we all came together as a family. And healthy eating was big, but I'm a little bit of a Templeton when it comes to candy. Like I will just take things and I have a pretty big sweet tooth. So they taught me a lot of, healthy eating in moderation and good activity and exercise. But one other thing that really stood out to me that I felt my parents did a really great job was when we were kind of growing up with social media coming into play, like Facebook and stuff like that, and just cell phones and sending pictures and things like that. It really became a lot of how you looked, but my parents were always like, looks are going to fade.
Hmm.
And it's really not about the looks. So helping build my confidence in that regard too. I never felt like when I passed a mirror, I was needing to like stare into it, for an endless amount of time. Obviously society puts a lot of things in for,
Yeah.
kind of in our brain, right? But
Yeah.
they helped me combat a lot of that stuff. So it set me up in a good foundation to end up in healthcare.
That's awesome that you have that foundation. So that really shaped who you are today. Um, as we kind of get into a little bit of you as a physical therapist, can you tell us like what was that moment, or what's the story for you that kind of shaped why you wanted to become the physical therapist and maybe some other healthcare provider?
Yeah, I think when I would interview students when I worked in academia for a brief time, I'd ask them, like, what made you want to become a PT?
Hmm.
And I heard a lot of responses, oh, I was injured and I needed physical therapy. And I came to it in a completely different way, I guess. When I was at the University of South Florida, I was going to school for biomedical sciences because I thought I
Hmm.
wanted to be a podiatrist. I'd
Okay.
had struggled with foot issues, dance, things like that. I thought, yeah, I can definitely do this. I want to help other people. I didn't really realize kind of almost how some of that stuff would make its entrance back in. But when I was in the degree, I couldn't pass biochem or organic chemistry.
Hmm.
So I was kind of like, oh no, what's my alternative if I'm not gonna be a podiatrist? I had tried my hand at accounting and business, and I had in community college, I had an accounting teacher who looked at me straight, like in my face, and was like, you don't know the difference between accounts payable and accounts receivable. Please, you should just like not go down this path. And
Whoa,
I was like,
jeez.
I know. And so I'm sitting there in my, time at USF thinking, oh, what am I going to do? Like, oh, I've made a grave mistake. Like, I can't continue on in the biomedical degree. So I met with an advisor, and by, the luck of the draw, the grace of whatever, right? I find out that they had just started a health science program where
Hmm.
you didn't need to take those courses and you could still get a degree, right? Health sciences to help you
Hmm.
to go on in the healthcare field. So I was able to complete that degree. I was actually the first graduating class with that degree. And then from there, it opened the door for me to then, when I applied to Nova, other schools in the area, I was able to, show that I had this background. And yes, I didn't have organic chemistry. And that to me, don't ask me to look at crazy, 3D shapes like that, even though biomechanics is a lot of that kind of stuff. I was able to get in that way. And, I didn't start off wanting to do PT, and I rounded back after because I knew I was likely not going to go to med school at that time. And it was my husband who I've known now for 18 years. He was the first one to be like, have you considered being a PT? And I was like, what is that? Like, I had no idea because I didn't need physical therapy up,
Hmm.
through my life at that point. And I started just to research it, and I started to shadow. And then all of a sudden, like in 3 months, I think I was on our board for the future PT organization at USF. And then I was the president. So I was really like, I was going to hit it and I was going to go really hard into it. So I guess that's the history behind it. And I just loved it because I got to get out in the community at the VA, at Moffitt, and I got to do observation hours at these places. And so I was able to really see firsthand. And that was the one thing that really did make me sad when I did work in academia with students during the pandemic who couldn't get shadowing hours. And
Mm.
they were like, I want to be a PT, but I'm going to be honest with you. I haven't even really seen it. I've watched videos and things like that. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, you've really got to see it to see the amazingness behind it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It is a definite, like, you got to be in the moment, hands
Yeah,
on, kind of see it, what's happening. Because you quickly can know if you're going to do it or not.
very much so. Very much so.
And you got to be a people person too. That's for sure.
Yes.
I just want to share something with you guys. I recently got this text from my brother. He said 90% of podcasts don't get past episode 3. That's 1.8 million people who quit. Of the 200,000 left, 90% will quit after 20 episodes. That's another 180,000 out the game. To be in the 1% of podcasts in the world, you only need to publish 21 episodes. Now, whether how true or not that is, that's encouraging, because I'm not here to just compete against the best, to be some top-rated podcast, although I do have goals set. My goal is to add value to you, and you can help me get there. If you really like this content, would you help me? Would you do me a favor by dropping a comment, liking it, subscribing to it? Would you tell me in the comments who I should interview? Could you maybe help me get that interview? To bring in conversations of people who have stories that are practical, relevant to us everyday people. Sometimes we hear these talks with famous celebrities, famous political people, just genius people. And although these are great conversations and I love listening to them as well, sometimes they're not relatable. And I want us to have relatable conversation, practical conversation, and conversations that hold us accountable and intentional to our action. We together will say that we are one step closer to being alive and well. I'm glad it worked out for you, and you're doing a lot of great things right now. And really, I think you are definitely taking the field into a direction that probably is a great way to market PT, in my personal opinion. Sometimes I look at these, this is like side conversation, but sometimes I look at these ways that we try to market PT, and I'm like, and I'm all about like direct access and stuff like that. I was like, but I feel like we're like so heavy on like one topic that there's other people that are out there doing like different ways of marketing it that we could probably highlight better. And that could probably expand the industry way more than just like, hey, we want to be direct access people. Like, you know what I mean?
Definitely.
I saw on your IG, I think it's your IG, it says you have a passion for holistic wellness. What does that mean, holistic wellness?
Yeah. So that's a really good question in terms of just the holistic piece, right? I think seeing myself and how my health journey has progressed, I was able to witness other people's, right? In terms of, I worked at Moffitt Cancer Center, I've worked in the acute care space and outpatient, seeing people just what they were missing out from a holistic picture, right? So they would
Mm.
come to me just for physical therapy, but I found myself coordinating so many other facets of care for people.
Mm.
Oh, they needed, maybe they really needed social work resources. They needed other support group resources that I felt like when I was in school and even when we got out of school, it was like nobody prepared you for like all the extra stuff that people were going to
Yeah.
need. And they were just like, we learned about the ICF model, right? And it was like holistic, treat the patient holistically. But it was like, what does that really
What does
mean?
that
And
mean?
then,
Yes.
yeah. And then you get out there and you're like, oh, holy poop. Like there's so much more to this. And like, there are just the buck goes way beyond just coming in and, getting some physical therapy done. And I
Yeah.
think when I really started to see that and I was really extending, I felt like I was like an octopus, right? Like sending my tentacles out to help people. And I was realizing that people really were not holistically well, like they were
Mm.
very unwell. And all this while I'm doing this work with people, I was not realizing how unwell that I was holistically
Okay.
until like a lot of stuff, I had to confront a lot of stuff. And it was so interesting to me because the work that I had been doing for other people and trying to be an advocate for their holistic wellness, right? And what does that look like? I think about now more than ever, and I never thought about it 5 years ago, is financial wellness. right?
Okay.
When somebody comes in and that's part of their, we're charging people sometimes copays. And what is that, their financial status? What does that look like? And how is that a stressor? And how is that impacting their back pain and their tension in their neck and all of these things that I started to sit and think about. And I was like, oh, wow. I was like, yeah, nobody told us about this. And it was just stuff you had to learn.
Yeah.
But so I really, whenever I work with a client on whatever capacity is, whether it's from a lymphatic perspective or purely Pilates or like, again, that holistic approach, whatever people are really wanting and needing, I try and take a seat back and get all that information and then figure out how best that I can advocate for them, but also help them reach that good, happy, holistic place for them.
Yeah. What would you say is your pillars to holistic wellness? Like, what would you, something I've been thinking about with this podcast and just in life is, as far as holistic health goes, it's like mind, body, soul kind of thing.
Yeah.
There probably is a aspect of financial health in there, emotional health. There's a guy who, I don't know if you follow him. His name is Mark Hyman. He's a doctor. He talks about like kind of a wellness approach. So what would you say from your experience people should consider as a holistic approach to wellness? What are those pillars that we should all kind of think about?
Yeah. When I think about it, and there's a book I was reading called Beyond the Trident. It's a really good book, but the author talks about a toadstool and the
Okay.
three legs, right? And that is really that mind, body, soul. I think that those are the things, the very firm pieces. And then off of that, right, you've got other supports, right? Like maybe the toadstool has a back support, and that's maybe that's your community, right, support
Mm,
system that also impacts that, right, mind, body, soul. And
yeah.
then other external factors, right? But I watched, when I was in a really not so great place, I watched Jonah Hill did a documentary. And
Oh, the mental health one.
yeah,
Yeah, where he was talking with this psychiatrist or something like that.
yeah. And the
Yeah.
psychiatrist has like Parkinson's or something. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know, where he is in his journey, but it really resonated with me because the first thing he mentioned right in the levels of like what you can do was like physical health and your exercise and what you can do. And when I was in I was in an absolute awful place in my life, Pilates, that's where my practice really came back in. And
Mm,
so that was something that I could control in a lot of other factors that I didn't feel like I had control at the time.
yeah. No, I like that a lot. That kind of segues to my next question. The business you own is Rise Pilates, and what is the story behind Rise Pilates? It's an interesting name, so tell us about it.
Yeah, I think so. When I guess take it back, I had been working in academia and I left academia because I thought to myself, after the pandemic, I was pretty burned out working in the hospital setting. I thought to myself, well, I had lab assisted, and a lot of people were like, oh, you're a great teacher, as a clinical instructor. I should do this. I should go teach. Um, Maybe I shouldn't always listen to people when they say I'm good at things and I should do things. I really got to learn to like curb that, uh, especially that enthusiasm with that. But had gone into higher education, and that was a world for me that I thought I was going to be able to make certain differences, but I just didn't fit there for this time. It was a really difficult transition for me out of it because I had crafted this identity where this is what I was going to do. My husband has his PhD in ed leadership and is an adjunct professor for universities in the Tampa Bay area, and he's a principal. So I thought to myself, well, you know, he's helping me, and this is something, I'm good at this. I think that was my ego really talking with things. But I was like, this is the path I'm going to go on. Like, it's going to be great for my family. This is stability. And when I got out of that, I was like, oh man, I can't just go back to physical therapy. Like I'm just going to go back and I'm going to like, for some reason I had it in my mind that like I had to be like, that was an upward trajectory for me in terrible times. Like somehow it was like, that was the mountain I was supposed to climb. But I had some really amazing people surrounding me right when I left that really did help me see that that was a mountain I did not have to climb. And so I was really, I became really nervous because, you know, as a millennial too, I think a generational hallmark is that we've got to be working. Like if I'm not working, I'm not productive. And oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Like I need to be doing something. And I went out and got a bunch of PRN PT positions. And I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to see what I can do. And that started to become overwhelming. And I was like, oh no, this also isn't good. And I had other people really kind of very kindly and some not so kindly, but say like, what are you doing? You're taking on too much. And this is not, you're just throwing anything at the wall to see what sticks. And the Pilates that I had been doing when I was in school, I wanted to become a certified Pilates instructor, but you know, time, excuses, other things popped up and I never did it. And I was like, I need to do this. I need to become a certified Pilates instructor. It just kind of like became my thing. And I think back to that Jonah Hill, like that documentary of like, you know, finding something, right, to put my energy towards that was healthy. And that was it because I had previously engaged in so many unhealthy, destructive behaviors up until that point. So for me to like get back and find myself a little bit, I had to do that. And I never necessarily intended to start a business from that. I was like, oh, I could work in a studio. But then I sat back and I realized that most of the jobs that I had previously had in places I had worked, I came from the philosophy of, I like what you're doing, but I think I could do it better. And that was not necessarily the truth, right? And I have been very humbled because every situation has taught me I can do things differently, but it doesn't mean it's better, right? Like it certainly doesn't mean that. And all of those experiences taught me so much. I'm really, really now more humbled and grateful for them because I think I kind of had an attitude of like, yeah, no, I can run this better. I can do this better until I realized that I could not. So especially owning your own business, you very realize it like the second you start that LLC. So my sister-in-law, we were trying to come up with ideas for names and I was like, I had come up with a bunch. I had sent them out to people. I was trying to gauge a market of what people thought. And I was sitting there and I was doing like a reverse plank and she drew a little stick figure of it. And she was like, this is your logo. I think this should be it. Cause I was like, I'm thinking Rise. And she was like, this is the logo. And I wish I had it to show you. I'll have to send it. But it stayed with me because I was like, oh, Rise, like everybody, I want people to rise from whatever struggle they're having. Pilates has helped me rise. And I did really struggle with having it be like wellness or Pilates because for me, that was this whole big branding thing, right? I was like, oh my gosh, if I'm just Pilates, I lose everything else. And I didn't want to, but I realized that I don't lose things by having that. And as I continue to build a wellness brand, that's okay that changes. But I think it's, you know, to get to that business point, I kept hearing in the back of my mind from that instructor I had, you don't know the difference between accounts payable and receivable. And I'm like, oh no. So going into the world of business ownership and really finding that my skill set right now is lending itself to more entrepreneurial type of a route and that kind of mountain I'm going up is really exciting but scary. But I'm really thankful that I've made it.
I think you're going to get the last laugh on that lady. You're going to come one day to her office and you'll be like, this is what accounts payable is. And look at my bank statement now. Booyah. It's just like drop it.
I was so very like, oh no. And it's been an incredibly humbling experience to own my own business and to have those like very, I realized that talking about finances, right, makes a lot of people uncomfortable. But
Mm,
when I was at this summit, we were talking about shaping your career, right? And shape stood for different things like save, hard work. I think it was like accountability, perseverance, something. And they asked me to speak on the saving part. And I was like, oh, yeah, I have like 150,000 plus in student loan debt. I was like, and my personal budget, I was like, and I'm a new business owner. I will not be like shy to tell you. I'm certainly, most certainly not a millionaire. Like,
yeah, a story of all of our lives, right?
yeah, because I think when I got the award, somebody's like, "Oh, you're this really successful." Like, somebody was like, "Are you a chain like Club Pilates?" And I was like, "Oh no, oh it's just I. It's just one in the LLC." I was like, "It is a team of. There are teams like people around me helping me,
Mhm.
but yeah, I do not have an official employee yet." So
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I mean, every new business has its little moments and journeys, and we're always focusing on the mountain. But I actually heard this analogy the other day. I thought it was really good. We always think that we're climbing uphill to reach a point on the mountain, when actually the mountain, and when people would go up mountains like long ago, they would never just walk uphill. It was in a
right,
roundabout way. And
yeah,
so the paths were roundabout. So that way it always seems like there's a hard spot. Like you're looking at the same scenery, but you're at different
yeah,
altitudes the whole time.
yes,
And so you can look down and be like, oh, it's the same scenery, but look how far I've come. And
yeah,
then the thing I added to it was, when you're climbing that mountain, going higher and higher, oxygen gets lower. You know, you're starting to breathe a little heavier. It seems harder, but yeah, you're closer to the top of wherever you want to be. And it
yeah,
always seems more challenging, but yet you always have to just take a minute, pause, smell the flowers and trees around you,
yeah,
and then just look down to where you've come, right? And so I think for everybody that's on that journey of entrepreneurship or business, or just life, you always got to stop and take a minute. And I think you're giving us a good example of that. Just like, hey, there's going to be hiccups. There's going to be these women, or I'm sorry, there's going to be these people that tell me that I don't
yeah,
even know what account payables are and blah, blah, blah. And, but like, look at me now. Like, I'm not trying to shame that person, but like, I've come a long
yeah.
ways because of whatever motivation and stuff like that. So that's pretty awesome there.
Yeah. Thank you. I do love that analogy you mentioned, because I think of all the hikes that I've done, and yeah, I don't like that you just it was like a revelation when you have it, when you're talking to somebody. You're like, "Oh man, like I really need to, a perspective shift, right?"
Mm.
But you'll laugh at this. I was out in Yosemite,
Mm-hmm.
and we were doing this amazing hike, like John Muir Woods, like this wonderful hike.
Yeah, yeah.
But they had like these stairs to go up, Chris,
Okay.
and we went up so many of them, right? These stone stairs. And we do this hike, we summit it, it's beautiful. On the way back down, we get turned around and we have to go back down these stairs that everybody is now climbing. And we were like, we talk about it to this day, me, my husband, my sister-in-law, my father-in-law. I'm like, those stairs. I'm like, so I guess hopefully what I'm trying to avoid is and I'm sure it'll happen, but taking like hard, I know I'm going to take hard stairs down again at some point, but that was an insane experience.
Yeah. And even when we do take hard steps backwards, you have so much more perspective on how to do something quicker. That's like when you
Yeah.
watch these business people who say, have you ever seen these videos where they're like, if I started all over from scratch and I had to make $1 million, and you're like, okay, cool. It
Yeah.
sounds great for a video, but then you also are negating all the wisdom and errors and failures that
Yeah.
happened so that you can make it quicker today, right? Like, I
Yeah.
think people like miss that part. But yeah, you would be
I
a
do
hell of a
too.
lot smarter. So
Yes.
before we continue, I want to plug the GoFundMe below. We're raising money to build water wells in India and other places of the world. This is for small villages, rural areas that don't get adequate drinking water or clean drinking water. They don't have a neighborhood dollar store or Walmart that they can just pop by and grab some bottled water. So we've been doing this, and it's been successful the last couple times we've done it. And it doesn't take a lot of money. $500 is pretty much all we need, and we can build at least one or feed a couple families with that money. So can you help us reach our goal of building 3 water wells this year? That means $1,500 total. And so with your generosity today, someone or a group of people today can say they are alive and well. Thanks. What talking about Pilates, okay? I've seen it a lot. It's been trending, especially in America with no offense, white women that seem to do it a
Yes.
lot. What is the secret to Pilates? Like, can we categorize it higher on a scale of fitness than other movements, say like yoga or Tai Chi? Or how do you look at Pilates? Why is it so good for people? Or maybe you didn't think that in the beginning.
Yeah, it's so funny to hear you say that about like white women in America because I get a lot of clients and I'll get older women and I'll get men that reach out to me just through my website that want to connect. And they're like, I see your pictures and I've seen on video on social media, and it really looks like you have to look this way or be this way. And I was like, I did a meeting with somebody, and I think I'm dressed up pretty casual.
Mm-mm.
And they were like, oh, I was like, that was for a photo shoot. I was like, things are not, as they seem. I was like, come to my class. I make a lot of jokes about how I have a primordial pouch. Like, this is not, you don't have to look a certain way to do Pilates. And that's my thing. I'm like, I love that it's having its heyday, but having
Mm.
its, making it blow up. I have a client, she's from India, and she's
Mm.
like, oh, she was like, you white women take yoga and make it into this. And I was like, it just cracks me up because the way she talked about it. And she then told me about a comedian, and I was laughing because I watched her talk about it. And she was like, this is what I'm talking about, Emily. So when I think about Pilates in that perspective, like Joseph Pilates, the German man who came up with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
His intention was for everybody, right? To be able to do it. It wasn't just for women or dancers, even though, he was a rehab aide in World War One. Like he helped
Mm.
rehab people. So when I think about like our good girl Mary Mack, right? Mary
Mm-hmm.
McMillan, the mother of physical therapy. I'm like,
OG.
yeah, right. I'm like, but we also got to throw some love Joseph P's way because he was creating exercises. He watched cats in a parking lot for hours on end to study how they moved, and cats have 9 lives. So, I
Okay.
mean, like, that's pretty good, right? So, he comes up with mat Pilates, and then he's working with soldiers who are in hospital beds. And when you look at reformer Pilates, if you look at a reformer, it kind of looks like a hospital bed. So those two things, he
Mm.
was working with people. And then he came up, very heavily influenced in gymnastics. And then when he was in New York City, opened his studio, Joe's Gym, next to Balanchine, the famous dancer's studio, right? So dancers would get injured and go to him for rehab, but
Mm.
it became really, enmeshed, and you had other figures come out, Ramana, other like dancers that took on the Pilates practice because it was going to die with him when he passed if nobody carried it on. So, and then you had in Australia, physiotherapists really started to integrate it. And I love Australia. Like, I love, give me Pedro for a research bundle all day long. Like, I will go there. I used to send students all the time. I'm like, this is your database. Australia does it right. Like, they have,
Yes, they do.
the way they can do their research, and they, the research coming out from them way long before us baby US people,
Mm-hmm.
of like how Pilates is so helpful. And I think incorporating that, like I saw some exercises, right, that we learn in school when we were in PT school. And I was like, oh, this is very similar to things I grew up doing when I was doing Pilates in my younger years, right? In my teens and in my 20s. And I was like, okay, so I don't view it as superior by any means to
Mm-hmm.
yoga or to Tai Chi. I think it has its place in terms of your spinal mobility, your strengthening, your flexibility, things like that. But I certainly am a huge proponent, right, of like strength lift, weightlifting, and things like that. So I feel like it's almost like a parking lot, right? And the cars, Pilates is just a different car in the parking lot. Everybody,
Mm.
there's room in the parking lot for everybody, right?
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
do I think that Pilates is like, the G wagon of the bunch? I mean, I might be biased because I love it that much, and maybe something like CrossFit's like the Mazda. It's fine. You know what I mean? Like, cause I
The
did
Mazda.
CrossFit. I remember that way, but there's room for everything. And that's what I think is so great. And I think now what I would love for people to see is, and getting out in the community has allowed me to do this, is that Pilates doesn't have to just be done on the floor or on a reformer. I have older clients doing things in chairs, and we're
Mm.
doing things for clients in beds and who are maybe bed bound at places. And so there is just a gamut, and I would hate for people to only see that Pilates just looks this way.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's good. I guess I've seen it done with the reformer, and at our clinic we have a reformer. So I've been trying to learn a couple motions or movements to help some of our clientele, and then I've seen it on the floor. So that's cool that you can do it in so many different aspects and still get the benefit of it. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Do you think there's, or let me ask you like this: what are the core principles of Pilates? Like, what are the foundations that are for like the movements and stuff like that? How do you guys look at it?
Yeah. So I guess I'm going to hope that the Pilates gods don't strike me down when I give my perspective and piece on it, because if you just had a podcast, Chris, of like a bunch of Pilates instructors, you would hear, I mean, the differences, it's wild. But it's like with PTs, right? We kind of know, we see it from that
Mm.
perspective. But the core principles that Joseph really had, so in terms of, and Pilates was originally called contrology. So that was what he came up with, contrology. Think about like breaking that down. Control. So one of the main factors, right? Control of your body, right? There's a lot of movements where you have to do things very slow and
Mm.
controlled, and it's not about rushing through something fast. There's also a lot on breath work, but I think we can even say that we've seen, how many times have you been working with somebody and you're like, they just don't know how to breathe. They're holding their breath
Yeah.
when they're doing an exercise. And just the simple reminder cue of telling them to breathe is helpful. But I don't know about you, but I've been in some classes where they're like, and inhale, then exhale, then inhale. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I can't do it all at once. Like I'm probably gonna choke here. So, but breathing is something still with control, right? And
Right.
then another, just in terms of Pilates, really is rooted in that spinal health and your spinal mobility. So what does it look like for you to move and do movements with that spine being the very center, your axis, your focal point?
Your class on prenatal Pilates. How can Pilates help us before and after childbirth?
Let's.
Yeah, so my education for Pilates through Breathe Education, what I loved about them was they did such a great modules for prenatal and postnatal care, and they really used the American guidelines for obstetrics to lead the way with that in terms of guidelines and keeping women, safeguarding them, right, from injury during any sort of exercise. And they drove home with people like things that I knew, right, from my physical therapy background, but other people who were taking the course who didn't have that background, how to safely work with pregnancy, pre and post. But what it really does is, for those people who maybe don't have as active lifestyle as they'd like before pregnancy, help get them to a good strong body foundation for their pregnancy. And even, when having a child of my own, a lot of times you read things, it's like, don't start new exercise programs when you're pregnant. Like, don't do anything crazy out of the norm, right? But if you were kind of sedentary, you're like, oh, I got to do something, or
Mm.
you might have that like jumpstart for yourself. And so Pilates is a really great way to ease into exercises without it being so difficult and taxing on yourself. And it's then going to empower you to feel like, okay, hey, like I can do this. So maybe they're more willing to go out and do more cardio exercises a little bit more safer under the guidance of, a physical therapist or a health coach or something like that. And then the post is really huge because we talk a lot about, Now pelvic floor, right, is the
Hmm.
big huge thing, right? I feel like when we were in school it was kind of just coming up, but now it's
Yeah.
really, that's having its day too, which I love for men and women. I think we also need a lot more in the male space there because there's so much of that untapped.
Hmm.
But in terms of the postnatal care and pre, how it helps with your pelvic floor and having a child and what that does, right, in terms of safe exercises and that core. I know you hear people talking about, and they're like, oh, core schmore. Like, that's really not what it's about. But when you break it down, if you're talking to a lady who has the diastasis recti, like, you can't just be like, oh, just forget that. That's nothing. And
Right,
so
right.
these exercises are exercises that help with that. And I think that that's important that women know that they have that like little tool in their toolbox that they can pull out as an exercise.
We're going to transition a little bit, and it's still in the same premise, but I like to talk about mental and soul health as well. So, can Pilates help us connect to a deeper sense of self? Like, can these movements engage us on a soul level? What's your thoughts on that?
Yes, I 100% believe they can, because you take an exercise like the Pilates hundreds, right? Where you have to be in this pose of lifting your legs, lifting your head and neck up off and your arms, and you're like beating down, like you're beating the top of a pool. And you're supposed to do that for 100 counts, right? The
Hmm.
stamina and endurance that you have to have also mentally, right? To focus when it gets hard. What are you going to do? Are you going to drop when it gets hard? Or are you going to focus and hone in on something else to pull you through? And that really, when I would do workouts, when I was in it, just again, an absolutely unhealthy mental and physical space in my life, whenever I could push myself and I was able to hold an exercise for a long amount of time, or I was able to do something with heavier load, or I was able just to do the exercise correctly, right? Like the mental, like, woo, like points that went off in my head of like, little fireworks. It was such a boost for me. And I see it in my clients so much in terms of how it boosts their mental health. And I talk a lot about, especially when it comes to the reformer, is that mind machine connection.
Hmm.
And when I see clients get on the reformer and their mind is like really elsewhere and they're just on it, I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Let's just take a minute, because you're looking like, have you ever seen those videos where they're like, I'm never going to the gym again, because they show people doing like crazy whack
Yeah.
stuff at the gym and you're like, oh my gosh, this is wildly unsafe. When I see kind of stuff like that, because I want movements, right, to be done slower and intentionally.
Hmm.
And when I start to see that, I'm like, oh, like, do we need to just talk about what's going on? And
Hmm.
it opens the door for people, especially if I'm doing privates. If it's a class, I'm kind of not able to take so much of that time. But I've had clients really open up, and, we're just doing Pilates, but basically they're almost doing like a mental health counseling session at the same time, because they're like, actually, this is what's going on.
Yeah.
We've created a space for them to be able to talk about it. But Pilates definitely will help you tap into a space that I think sometimes we don't really want to tap into.
Yeah, no, that's pretty good. Would you suggest, you know how in life there's certain things that we all should like take as a prerequisite class, like I don't know, maybe like a tax class we all should take, right? Or like a I know like when you're pregnant, you have to go to a what is it, like a birthing class or something?
Yeah.
So do you think that Pilates should be like a prerequisite kind of class that every woman should take before birth and after birth? Like, what's your thought?
Yeah. I would say that, but also even kind of on a broader scale for women, but also even like for like even take it back to kids before they get to that point of like childbearing, men
Hmm.
and women. Um, just classes on how to move your body and body awareness and
Yeah.
body literacy, right? Because, I hate to use the term, and I mean, you and I know we both heard instructors say they're a motor moron. Like, like I hate that term, but because it's not sensitive, right? Really. And
Right.
it does, it's not nice. And sometimes it's just like, man, if you would have known these things before, like how to move your body better, that prerequisite, right? It would just become second nature in your mind, and you
Yeah.
wouldn't even like it, when you got to a bad place, maybe mentally or physically, you would also have that to draw back onto. You would have that to remember. So I'm definitely a proponent for, yeah, before, but even, I mean, let's get in the schools and get Pilates for kids.
You had said something earlier about like taking it back for children, but also you had mentioned men too. In the space of Pilates, why it seems like it's a very woman-based kind of motion or exercise. What's your thoughts on like why men don't want to do this, or what is it like a marketing thing? Is it just like it's like how do you address this for men, right? Like what do you think?
Excellent question. So I've kind of seen it on both ends of the spectrum. It's been really interesting because I feel like the younger generation that I've seen, some of the men that come out to my classes, I had a guy come up to me after and he's like, I really got to thank you. He was like, for putting this on. He was like, because it's really helping me meet women. And I was like, okay, but like, is it helping you in other facets of your life, Joe? It's like, I'm glad for the social aspect for that. Love that for you. But also, so I think sometimes you get that end of it, right? But there's probably some right intimidation of going, and it's like not necessarily you're right. You're not with a group of people who you look around
Yeah.
and they look like you, right? In terms of diversity, and they see those exercises and they see the flexibility stuff that sometimes they're like, oh my gosh, like I'm supposed to be like beefy and strong and not flexible. And we're like, wait, no, that's a terrible societal, like that is not, that's not how it's supposed to go. One of my best clients, and he's just absolutely amazing. He does Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And he's like, he's done MMA. He teaches to young, like 4-year-olds all the way up, right? And he's like, he promotes me, and really he comes to me for private sessions, and he's like, my back, he has chronic back pain from years of doing that. And he's also like motocross, his adrenaline's off the charts, but he's
Right.
like, this helps me so much. And so I think keying into like the back pain and the issues that men are having specifically, trying to market that has been something that I've been working towards, and not just like, oh, come to this class with all these women doing these, like there's a market for all of that. But I think with men specifically, you've got to really market how they're going to feel better, but get more classes geared towards men's health.
Actually, side note, that is a great idea to maybe we could do this sometime soon, where we just get a bunch of guys and we video film you doing Pilates with guys and use that as some marketing. And then, because I've seen the videos of like athletes doing it and things like that, but it's always like, it's never a consistent thing. They always bring in somebody to do it for like one time.
Yeah. And working with, I guess this could be a little side thing, but working with athletes, like I have worked with a few, and I may end up doing some work with guys for the combine.
Okay.
But what's really interesting is that it's like, how do you get them to stay? How do you get them to see the value? And you are starting to see, like, there are a few instructors who work with teams and things like that. So I think they're starting to come around, but then it's like, that's a whole job in itself, right? To take care of them. But I totally get what you're saying. A lot of guys will maybe come to a class or two and then they don't come anymore, which obviously isn't going to benefit them.
Man, there's a lot of questions that I can continuously talk with you about. It's actually giving me a lot of perspective too. So, obviously you want healthcare providers to be your biggest proponent in some of this, right? So just keep.
Yes, I love it. And I'm such a connector, and community is so big. So yeah, I would love to continue the conversation. And
I actually am enjoying this conversation a lot. So thank you, Emilie. Let's connect soon. Hey, thanks for listening to this episode today. I hope this conversation was beneficial for you. If it was, would you mind doing me a favor and maybe sharing this with someone? See, the way we grow in community is by being intentional. So when you share it with someone, it not only helps me, but it helps them grow in their walk so that they can be one step closer to saying they are truly alive and well. Thanks.